All right, students, chapter 13 is about the Jackson era, and most of these sections have got so much information in them that I am going to break them down into several sections. All right, starting after the War of 1812, when everybody was so proud of our country, like I said at the end of the last unit, there were not really two political parties anymore. There was just mainly the Democratic-Republican Party. The Federalists had faded from view. They were the ones who had tried this Northern secessionist idea twice, and it hadn't worked. And people were just they were proud of being American, and that's what the Democratic Republicans, that's what they were symbolizing. Now, however, inside that party, there were factions or groups, and you need to know that word factions in the second bullet point. And so by 1824, there are 4 different candidates trying to be president inside the Democratic Republican Party. And you don't need to know these names. You see me being snarky down here. You don't need to know William Crawford. You don't need to know his name because he's obviously an epic fail. So don't bother worrying about his name. Okay, 2 other candidates that were decided to run at that time were pretty heavy hitters. There was Andrew Jackson from Tennessee. Now, both of these guys are Western, and I think that's worth commenting on because up to this point, most all of the people who had run for office were from the seacoast, a lot of them from Virginia, from old families who had been here forever, and were from the Northeast and were lawyers. Now, Clay was from Kentucky, and Jackson was from Tennessee. Clay was pretty highly educated, and he was part of the House of Representatives. And these people were called favorite sons. A favorite son is not something you have to know, but you may hear people speak of it at some time. That's a candidate that is backed mostly by their home state rather than by a national party. Like I say in the third bullet point, Clay is Speaker of the House. Now, that's a very powerful position. I think there's something like third in line for the presidency, so it's very powerful. And Jackson is a war hero from the War of 1812. So again, people know his name. People are well aware of who Jackson is. All right, a little bit about Andrew Jackson. He had been raised in poverty, and he has a memory of the War of 1812. I spoke about this a little bit in class. The British had been in his little tiny town and had invaded his home. His older brother had fought in the Revolution, and the British had been in his home and slashed him across the face with a sword. He was a British hater. But he comes from a very poor background and really doesn't have a whole lot of formal education. Not like Lincoln, don't think Lincoln, but he doesn't have a whole lot of formal education. And he claims to speak for the common man, for people who have been left out of politics, for people who have the dock workers, the farmers, the regular folks. The third favorite son in this race is John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts. Now, he is from privilege. He's the son of a former president, and he's obviously popular with people from Massachusetts. I want to stop us a little bit here. I want to go to the next frame. I want to stop here for a second before I go into what's going on in this frame and talk about John Quincy Adams. John Adams himself, the father, who was part of the founding of the country and the Revolution and all that, present during pre-revolutionary times, had defended the Redcoats for the Boston Massacre, just trying to show the world that we can give them a fair trial. John Adams himself had not been starting out as a wealthy person. Lawyers back in those days were not automatically wealthy. So John Adams then rises to power in the political party, becomes Washington's vice president, later on goes to become president. So he had become wealthy for the times. Over his lifetime, he had accumulated wealth. But understand that John Quincy Adams was very wealthy from the beginning, was sent over to Europe to the best schools. So he's sort of born with a silver spoon in his mouth. All right, in this election, Jackson receives a plurality of the popular vote, but no candidate receives a majority. So nobody gets 51%. All right, when this happens, the Constitution requires that the House of Representatives selects a president. All right, again, so we haven't had very many presidential elections here, and already the thing is being thrown to the House several times. All right, I have this little picture down here below. Obviously, there's no photographs back then, and obviously this picture is not a photograph of anyone back in those days. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes with this House of Representative choice. People are bribing, people are trying to twist arms, people are trying to do everything they can to get their own person chosen as president. So as the House prepares to vote, Clay meets with Adams, all right? Clay knew that he's not going to be elected. Now, he's sort of in a snit about this, but he wants to be a power broker, and he can be because he's, Speaker of the House, hello. And he agrees to use his influence as Speaker to defeat Jackson. So he's like, Clay, I'll help you out if we can both agree to defeat Jackson. Okay, and with Clay's help, the House does choose Adams to be president. And then, lo and behold, Clay chooses Adams to become his Secretary of State. What a shock. Jackson's followers accuse Clay and Adams of a corrupt bargain. And I have a picture down here at the bottom of, and this picture's old now because it's of President Obama and Senate people, Democrats, Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi. Because even in the, I don't know if this picture was from 2008 or 2012, I don't know. But even as late as those years, they promised to be honest in government, but there's no honesty in government. There hasn't been since back in these days. You can see that there was no honesty in government back in those days, and there still isn't any honesty in government. Okay? There's all this going on behind the scenes, and there always has been, and there always will be, people. That's just the way things function. So Jackson's followers accused Clay and Adams of a corrupt bargain, and of course, it was a corrupt bargain, obviously. So Adams and Clay deny any wrongdoing, and no one uncovers any evidence of the bargain, but the whole thing never leaves Adams' presidency. It haunts him, and it follows him, and it just nags him through his whole presidency. Now, he's got some good ideas, Adams does. I don't want you to think that he's just a terrible person, because he's not. He wants to build roads and bridges, and this is good. We want roads and bridges. We need this for our new country. We've got lots of people out west. We need this thing. He wants to build a national university. He wants to support scientific research. He's got great ideas. But because of all this going on, he's Congress and lots of people in Congress are going to thwart him at every turn. And plus his proposals smack of more federal government. And his opponents want less federal government. Congress finally does approve things for money for like rivers, harbors, roads, but not much else. They're not going to give him money for his national university. They're not going to give his money for scientific research. And honestly, most people, even like dock workers in the Northeast, even though he's from the Northeast, they all feel like Adams is just one more wealthy, entitled person who, because of his family, becomes president. And I think that you people can identify with this, having just been through a presidential election year or cycle, several years of the cycle, where we had some people running for president who were really kind of running on their name, Bush and Clinton. I mean, a lot of people said on both sides, we really just don't want more of that. We've had that, and we don't want more of that. And then there's the backroom shenanigans between him and Clay. And so this just dogged him the whole time he was president, and it created a problem for him. So now we have the election of 1828 coming up. The Democratic-Republican Party had split. Now you really have them, remember, we all got just one party, but now we had several groups within that party, and now it's actually going to split in two. Jackson's supporters began to call themselves just Democrats. Please remember this. Andrew Jackson is the father of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party you see today. Remember, I've told you for months now, do not equate the current political parties with anything we've been talking about. Now it's time to do that. Andrew Jackson is the father of the current Democratic Party. You need to know that. The Democrats, honestly, I know Andrew Jackson's got his detractors and there's things wrong with him, but they should be proud of that. He was a war hero. He saved New Orleans. There's a lot of good things about Andrew Jackson. He's got bad points, but he's got good points, just like all of them do. So anyway, the National Republicans support Adams. Most Democrats support states' rights. That's a good thing. They distrust a strong central government because they're thinking it's getting too much power. That might be a good thing, too. Now, during the campaign, though, both sides resort to mudslinging slogans, buttons, and rallies. Sounds kind of like what you've just seen. Sounds kind of normal for our political party system, the way it exists today. And so it goes on, the same thing that you've seen was going on back in 1828. Jackson, I love this electoral college map, so just because it's real easy to see. Look at John Quincy Adams. He gets most of the northern states and also he gets Maryland, which is sort of a border state. But Jackson receives most of the votes in the frontier states and many of the southern states. Adams takes only the northeastern states, but of course these states have more concentrated population. John C. Calhoun, who was from South Carolina, had been Adams's vice president. Calhoun was Adams's vice president, but he actually switched parties to join up with Jackson as his running mate. Now, you're going to see here, this is interesting. So Calhoun was Adams's vice president. He's going to switch parties to join up with Jackson. He's going to cause Jackson some problems. He's not going to be easy going for him. But you see how Jackson gets, even though there's less population in all the rest of those states, he gets enough of them to win that election. All right, I'm going to stop here and pick up with Andrew Jackson as he is president and some of the things that happened as he is president.